Hello and welcome to Monday's webinar. Today we're going to be talking about a moral obligation, I've called this webinar. And what I mean by that is your moral obligation to train your own horse. And a lot of people hear me say that and they go, oh, I don't understand what that means and why should I train my own horse? And I'm not experienced enough to train my own horse, and all these other things come up. But I just want to talk to you about why I feel you should train your own horse, even if you don't do everything from, the very start to the very finish, or some of us, get horses that have already been trained. And, what I want to make clear is what I'm trying to say is that you should take responsibility for your horse when you have it. So, we can't all start young horses, and those of us that can should, I think. For myself, I only ever buy horses these days that have just fallen on the ground, and I usually say to the breeder, please don't touch it and send it to me as soon as it's old enough, just because I've seen the damage that can be done from such a young age. And I think it's very important. I think it's something that we need to be aware of, is that quite often with very young horses, they have experiences that really never leave them. And I don't think that's fair on the horse. And I think it makes the rest of the horse's life very difficult. And it quite often makes them quite dangerous to be around. So I think what we need to remember is that the horse has no choice in this relationship. The horse didn't ask to be, given or assigned to a certain owner. The horse has no choice about where it's kept, about how it's kept, or anything else. So it's our responsibility as owners to do the very best that we can by our horse. And when we look at that, we often think about, how we house the horse, how we feed the horse, the veterinary care we give to the horse. And that's all great. That's all well and good. But it's very basic. If we're really talking about welfare, then we need to also consider the mental aspects, not just the physical aspects of the horse, but it's my dog barking at something outside. But also, what the horse is going through mentally and how the horse is trained. All of these are really important for the horse's welfare. And that's why I say you have a moral responsibility to do this. Because, dear little thing, Mackie. Let's see if I can get him to come here. He might be a bit quieter. I think one of the things we need to think about a horse, you often hear people say, come here. You often hear people say that, they're installing things on a horse, like they're installing buttons, the go button and the stop button and things. But I think, that it's wrong to think of a horse like that, because a horse isn't a computer. We can't install things on a horse. I can't send my horse out to somebody else and have them install buttons on it and expect the horse to behave in the same way when it comes home to me. It just doesn't work like that. They're not computers. My relationship with my horse and what I can get the horse to do will depend on what I've taught the horse. So, if I want the horse to behave in a certain way or respond to a cue in a certain way, then I personally need to teach the horse that. Let's say when I ride, I want the horse to go faster, let's say in trot, when I cluck. So I have this cue like that, and that means trot faster if the horse is already trotting. So I can teach the horse that. I can teach that, first of all, on the ground, and then I can transfer what that horse has learned to the saddle. I can do that by giving 3 cues. So the first cue is the one I want the horse to respond to. So that's double clucking at the horse, so like that. I start this on the ground. First cue is that. The second cue might be to raise the dressage whip. The third cue might be to tap with the dressage whip. So those 3 cues mean go faster. And the horse learns that pattern. The horse starts to respond when you tap the horse. So of course, the horse doesn't want to be tapped with the whip. So the horse learns the pattern, because I'm consistent with my pattern. I always do the 3 cues. The horse starts to respond when you raise the whip. And then the horse really has that pattern solid in his head, and he says, oh, I know what's going to happen next. She double clucks, then she's going to raise the whip, and then she's going to tap me with the whip. So I want to avoid all of that. And pretty soon the horse is responding to the verbal cue, which is what I wanted. You might not want that. You might prefer your horse to respond to a touch of the leg or something like that. I use the verbal cue because it's the lightest cue that I can come up with for the horse. So, that can transfer directly to the saddle. If somebody else has taught the horse something else, let's say I sent the horse off to a trainer and the trainer taught the horse, well, you squeeze with your legs and that means go faster. Unless I know that and I decide that I want to use that cue, it's really unfair on the horse to expect the horse to know my cue, my cue being the cluck. So what I need to do is I need to teach the horse my cue. And I think it often happens, we sort of expect horses to know things because they're commonly used cues. Like putting your leg on is a really commonly used cue to mean go faster. So when the horse doesn't respond to that, we assume that the horse is behaving badly or being lazy or something else. But perhaps the horse just has never really been taught that cue. Or perhaps the horse is desensitized to that cue. You see, legs in particular, I find horses desensitized to very quickly. So what happens is if you use your leg, let's say you put your leg on the horse and you want it to go faster, and it does go faster, but you keep your leg there, then the horse is going to desensitize to that cue because it's no longer negative reinforcement. The thing about negative reinforcement is you've got to release the pressure. It's pressure release. So if you don't release the pressure, the horse desensitizes to the cue. And this happens a lot. We see this a lot with horses that we call lazy. And they're not really lazy. I mean, the horse is unlikely to be lazy. The horse has just been desensitized to a pressure cue. The reason it's been desensitized is because it's been subjected to unrelenting pressure. And I think it's a very important thing to remember. I always tell people that if you put pressure on a horse, and be it leg pressure or rein pressure, or you just, put your hand on the horse's rump like this, have a place to release, have a result of that pressure. Never put the horse under pressure without knowing what reaction you want the horse, what movement you want the horse to perform and that means when you can release the pressure. So if I put my hand on the horse's rump, I want the horse perhaps to step away from that. And I release that when the horse steps away. If I put pressure on the bit, I might want the horse to turn left, and I release that when the horse turns left. If I put my leg on the horse, I want the horse to go faster. I release it when it goes faster. If you've watched dressage, for example, or you've had dressage lessons, you're quite often taught, wrap your legs around the horse and support the horse. Well, the horse doesn't need any support. The horse is perfectly capable of carrying itself around in the field. Why should you need to support it with your leg the entire time you're riding it? All you're going to do is desensitize your horse to leg cues. And that's why, pretty soon you need spurs. You need spurs because they make your leg cues more meaningful. They're more pressure than just the leg itself because you've desensitized your horse to the leg. And we do this to horses a lot, and then we wonder why they become lazy or, they become difficult. And quite often it's just because they're trying to get rid of that sort of relentless pressure that we've programmed them to put up with. So I think what happens in the horse gets confused. So when the horse gets back to the owner after it's being trained by somebody else and the owner's cues are different, then the horse gets confused. And as soon as the horse gets confused, the welfare risk increases because, a confused horse can quite quickly become quite a dangerous horse. A horse that we're assuming is being naughty, and you hear this quite a lot. Oh, he knows what I want, he's just too lazy to do it. Or he knows I want him to get on the trailer, but he doesn't want to do it. And that sort of thing is quite difficult for the horse, because we can't assume that the horse knows that. We really can't. The horse might just be confused. Making the assumption of what the horse is thinking, I think, is a big mistake on our part and is very risky welfare-wise to the horse. Because the reason is because it quite quickly leads to punishment. Now, punishment is anything that makes or is likely to make a behavior less likely to occur in the future. And it's important that we understand that. Reinforcement makes things more likely to occur in the future. So if you want the horse to trot faster, if you use negative reinforcement, you release your leg pressure when the horse trots faster. That's going to make the horse more likely to trot faster next time you put your leg on, because you released it. So it makes that behavior more likely to occur. Punishment makes the behavior less likely to occur. So let's say your horse bucks, for example. If you, after that, you hit it with the whip, that's punishment, because you don't want the horse to buck again. So you've reacted to that by hitting it with the whip. And what happens when we make assumptions about what horses think, that often leads us down that punishment road because we're trying to correct the horse. So let's have a horse in a round pen, for example, that kicks at you as it goes past. A lot of people tell you that horse is disrespectful. That horse needs to respect you. And it's quite tempting then, if you're the person in the round pen, to chase that horse away. And that's a form of punishment. You're trying to stop the horse. You're saying to the horse, don't kick at me because it's disrespectful, and I'm going to chase you for doing that and make you canter for one round or half a round or whatever it is, and make you go faster than you want to go, so that you don't do that again. Okay, so that the behavior doesn't happen again. You're wanting to make that behavior less likely. It's a punishment. And I think it's very good to be clear on that. Even if you decide to use punishment, we know that punishment doesn't work very well with horse training, but it's very important that you're clear on what you're using, because for me, it might be completely, what I call a correction, you might call a punishment. What I call a punishment, you might call a correction. It's the same thing. It's just a nicer word. So let's say, go back to the round pen example. The horse kicks at you as it goes past. You assume it's being disrespectful, so you chase it, or make it go faster. Yeah? I might make it go faster for 3 strides. You might make it go faster for 3 rounds at canter. Somebody else might throw the lariat at it and, wallop it on the hindquarter. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. It's all things that are trying to make that behavior less likely to occur in the future, which means it's all different forms of punishment. It's just a continuum. This might be blow a raspberry at the horse. Don't do that. That's really naughty. And this one might be chase the horse around the round pen for half an hour. There's a continuum. So what is important is that we're really clear on what sort of reinforcement or punishment we're using. So in the same situation, if you had the horse that kicked at you as it was in the round pen, you might say, okay, well, I don't want to correct the horse. I don't want to use punishment. What can I do? And, for me, I'd use positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement and try and engage the horse with learning. So I'd say, okay, well, the horse kicked at me. The horse is obviously not enjoying what we're doing in the round pen. Or the horse has some sort of learned behavior. Perhaps it's been chased in the round pen before and it really doesn't like the round pen because of that, And so I'd engage the horse with learning. So I might teach the horse something. Let's teach the horse inside turns, perhaps, and engage its brain. If the horse is doing something you don't want it to do, then rather than focusing on that, focus on what the horse isn't doing that you do want it to do. All right? So rather than focusing on the horse kicking at you or being disrespectful, focus on what the horse isn't doing. So the horse isn't paying attention. The horse isn't listening to your cues, anything like that. And you'll actually start to be a more proactive trainer rather than a reactive trainer. You get very reactive when you look at what the horse is doing that you don't want it to do. So it's really important that you turn that around and say, okay, well, what isn't the horse doing that I've asked it to do. And it's quite possible you haven't asked it to do anything. It's quite possible you've been really blur and you've just gone into the round pen. You're saying, oh, trot around or something. And that's no good. That's not enough. That's not going to engage the horse's brain. It's your job, it's your responsibility as the horse's trainer or owner to engage its brain. If you want the horse to do something good and something sensible and something safe, then you've got to ask it to do that. You can't just hope that the horse is going to know what to do. Training is all about engaging the horse's brain. A lot of people say to me, I'm not experienced enough to train my own horse. And that's a really interesting thing because, to be honest, you are experienced enough. If you own a young horse, you have a responsibility to get that experience. So let's say, you buy a sort of 4-year-old horse and you've hardly ridden before. Well, I think it's probably a mistake, really, but if you learn with your horse, that's great. But you have to say, okay, I don't know enough to be riding a young horse. So rather than bringing the young horse down to your level, you've got to say it's my responsibility as the horse owner to bring myself up to a level where I can ride that horse. We send horses off to trainers to be broken in for 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. Most of these horses go off to a trainer. So here's a horse who's been standing in the paddock for its life. It's 3 or 4 years of young life. And suddenly we send it off to a trainer and we expect it to know all of these things, walk, trot and canter, be quiet. If you've got a very inexperienced rider, be bomb-proof, whatever that means. And then, come back to a completely new situation, to somebody who probably has completely different cues to the trainer, and be okay. And it's not realistic, it's not realistic for the horse to have to go through that or to know all of those things. So it's, as an owner, it's your responsibility to make sure that you have your knowledge and skill level appropriate for the horse that you're riding. And I think that's, it's right for any horse at any level. If you get a new horse or you bring the horse back in after a time off, it's very important that you develop your knowledge together with that horse so that your cues, the horse understands your cues, which are going to be different from somebody else's cues. And if the horse has been off for a long time, then it's quite possible that your training has moved on, your riding has moved on, your riding has changed. So it's important that you bring that horse back into work and establish your cues with that horse. Does it take a long time? People say, oh, I haven't got time to do all of that, retrain my horse. Well, no, of course not. It really doesn't take a long time. They're very intelligent animals. You just need to be consistent with them. Your pressure release timing needs to be good and your work needs to be consistent. And you'll be amazed. It really is quite fast, because once you start teaching good patterns with horses, they get very confident because they're great pattern learners. So if the horse always knows, back to our example of making the horse trot faster, cueing the horse to trot faster, we use the cluck, first, and then we lift the whip, and then we tap with the whip. There's 3 cues. The horse will learn that pattern really fast, and it transfers to the saddle really easily. You can still use the whip, or you can substitute your leg there. So you cluck, and then you might put your leg on, and then you might squeeze with your leg. So these things make a lot of sense to the horse. And we have to make sure that we're explaining that to any new horse or any horse that's been on a break, so that we can bring the horse's emotional level down. Their emotional level comes down when they learn these patterns. And you can see the horse think, oh, is that all it is? Just trot a bit faster. I can do that. So I mentioned a minute ago, about the bomb-proof horse, and a lot of people that don't have much experience go looking for a bomb-proof horse. But what exactly is a bomb-proof horse? The whole idea just terrifies me, because usually it's a horse that has been so desensitized to its surroundings that it's probably in learned helplessness. Now, Learned helplessness is a situation where the horse knows whatever it does, nothing, no pressure is going to be released. So there'll be no change in the pressure that this horse is under, no matter what it does. So it just switches off, mentally switches off. And, you know, you do see this quite a lot in children's ponies. And I think the reason that it happens with children's ponies is because children are very bad at release. You know, they're very bad at timing. They're you know, they just are. They're just not good at it. And they don't have a lot of empathy for the animal either. So, you know, as adults, you know, we can sort of imagine what the horse is going through when you pick up some pressure on the rein. You know, we really can do that. And children's brains haven't developed in the same way as yet. They don't have the life experience to be able to put themselves in the horse's position. And so what happens with those sorts of horses is that they desensitize because, you know, they have a lot of bit pressure all the time. They get kicked. You see the kids at pony club. I take my son to pony club, and there's one child in there in particular that used to be Velcroed into the saddle, which was an interesting concept. Not one we'll discuss here. Velcroed into the saddle, given a short crop, riding on this great big pony that she had the reins in one hand, constantly, she was only, you know, 6 or something, constantly balanced on the little pony's mouth, and the other hand was constantly whacking the pony all day long with the whip. And this thing was just, you know, inland helplessness. So that was it. Completely didn't react to anything. Completely unresponsive. Very sad. Also, I think that those horses can wake up suddenly. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that. It's not pretty, but, you know, the horse that seems to be completely shut down goes to a new home, and suddenly, whoa, hang on a minute. Wow, all that pressure's gone away. You're a really nice person. I'll wake up. And suddenly you realize, oh my gosh, you know, that horse knows nothing. I think I used to find it quite a bit in the States with horses that were described as reining train failures at reining training. Reining training is particularly, or can be particularly harsh on some horses. And I don't know if this is the same for other disciplines or not, but it's something that I've found with reining trained, particularly horses. And anyone that tells you that their horse failed reining training is often a horse that refused to go into learned helplessness, because they're often put under so much pressure. And some horses just won't stand for it. Some will just sort of switch off and they'll be fine. But some say, no, not dealing with this. And they get very reactive and very unpredictable. And those horses I came across quite a lot. And I'd say, has this horse ever been reining trained? She'd say, oh, yes, but they said it wouldn't be a good reiner because of X, Y, and Z. So it sort of went through the training, and yeah. Anyway, interesting. They can actually switch back on even after they switch off. So that's really all I wanted to talk about today. It was just to talk about this moral responsibility. So what do you do about it, you know? And I think the thing is that once you take responsibility for your horse, no matter what your riding experience is, no matter what your level of trainer is, you can learn with your horse. And, you know, I see a lot, I mean, I talk to people every day with situations that, you know, are quite frightening, where horses' behavior has become really dangerous. And if you get the horse before that, or if you start to sort of take responsibility early on and learn with your horse, I think it's so important. And I think you can avoid so many of these major problems, major behavioral problems, if you do that. And even if you've got a horse that is very experienced, you know, they've been there, done that type of horse, I still think you need to take that horse back to foundations, especially if it's a new horse to you, or even if it's a horse that's been off for a while, which is what we're talking about at the moment, bring your horse back into work. I think that you still can take that horse back to basics and make sure that you have, that you understand, your horse understands the cues that you're using, and that you really get control of that horse's emotional level, because training is really all about being able to manipulate the horse's emotional level. You have to make the horse a little bit more emotional to engage it with learning, and then you offer it the opportunity to relax, and you engage it and you relax, and you engage it and you relax. And this is all really important, because we can't just, if we get a horse that's been in a bad situation, if we get a horse that's very anxious, then we can't just get the horse to relax. We actually have to engage the horse's brain. We have to teach it something. This is why I start with give to the bit, because with give to the bit, you only need to lift the horse's emotional level a little bit, and that really engages the horse, because you're giving it a simple exercise to do. So you're using the bit between the ears, you're not muscling the horse around, and you really learn to engage the horse with learning quite quickly, and it gives you that control of a horse's emotional level, which is so important to you. Now, I've got some free training out. There's a series of 4 videos. If you haven't got that yet, if you just pop along to the website, you can pick it up now. It's not going to be available for very long at all. I think it all shuts down on December the 1st, because I'm starting a new course on December the 1st, which I'm very excited about. And I'll tell you a bit more about next week when it opens. I will see you then. Bye.